Biden is in a rough spot this week. I think that's fair to say. I think Joe Biden's having... Clay, is this the worst week of his presidency? I think this has to be the worst week of his presidency. This may be the worst week of any president's presidency in 20 years. I
was trying to think. I mean, obviously 9/11 was a different level. But since then, what week would you point to as somebody having a worse week than this?
Even the rise of ISIS under the Obama administration, because it was
gradual,
phased. Yeah. Exactly. It didn't have the same. There was a blitzkrieg, and there were some similarities. You had the Islamic State, which they called ISIL, of course, all the time, and everyone else was like, just call it ISIS, you weirdos. But they had a blitzkrieg into Mosul, a city that I know better than I would care to, and the Iraqi army abandoned things. Anyway, worst week the Biden administration's had in a while. But on the issue of COVID, they're just doubling, tripling down on everything. They're not saying, oh, we have to give everybody boosters now. Maybe we should rethink. They just turn the screws tighter all the time. And as you know, everybody, I've been telling you, I think they're going to come after people in different ways here for vaccination that live outside of the blue cities. Here is Biden just yesterday during this press conference that he gave. No questions about Afghanistan in the press conference.
Didn't take any.
Right.
Yes.
I mean,
didn't take a single question.
The Taliban is taking more questions about their policy on by American media in Afghanistan than Joe Biden is. But here is what he said on vaccinations, because I want to drill down into that. Play 4.
So let's be clear. Vaccination requirements have been around for decades. Students, healthcare professionals, our troops are typically required to receive vaccines to prevent everything from polio to smallpox to measles to mumps to rubella. In fact, the reason most people in America don't worry about polio, smallpox, measles, mumps, or rubella today is because of vaccines. It only makes sense to require a vaccine that stops the spread of COVID-19. And it's time for others to step up. Employers have more power today to end this pandemic than they have ever had before. My message is simple. Do the right thing for your employees, consumers, and your businesses. Let's remember, the key tool to keeping our economy going strong is to get people vaccinated and at work.
Nice job you got there. It'd be a shame if you lost it because you didn't get vaccinated. That's what the president of the United States, Clay, is telling the private sector that often operates at the mercy of the federal government to do right now.
Yeah, it's default state action. But the bigger issue here, I think, Buck, is 100% vaccination rate would not end COVID. And this is the biggest lie associated with the you need to get vaccinated aspect of this Joe Biden pitch right now. I was talking about this a little bit earlier, and the data is out there. Iceland is one of the most vaccinated countries in the entirety of the world, Buck. They have done an incredible job of getting their people vaccinated. Iceland has had, let me give you these numbers, 91.2% of the adult population in Iceland is at least partially vaccinated. Nearly 87% are fully vaccinated. We now in Iceland have got the highest number of cases of COVID anywhere in that country that has ever existed. This surge is higher than ever before. If vaccination were going to solve this as an issue, then being 87% vaccinated would end it. And remember, Buck, initially we were told if 70% of people would get vaccinated, this thing would be over in the United States. Guess what? We're over 70% of adults vaccinated, and it hasn't.
They're comparing, Biden is openly comparing and what Clay's telling you is just playing out the thesis that we've been discussing here with Alex Berenson, who will be with us tomorrow for a Berenson Victory Lap. So to give you a breaking news update, the D.C. bomb threat suspect has surrendered, okay? So no one hurt, no bomb went off. We'll get into more on this, though, about the vax mandates when we come back.
Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show, as we roll through the final hour Thursday edition. Wanted to hit you some numbers yesterday. We teased this. And a lot of the discussion, Buck, we've had, obviously the focal point right now is get as many people home from Afghanistan, American citizens, safely as we possibly can. We want them all to get to the airport and to safely return to this country. But one of the big points of discussion has been, and you heard us just ask Senator Haggerty, who was with us at the top of this hour, what sort of impact is this foreign policy failure potentially going to have on the larger Joe Biden domestic agenda? with its record of futility here. A couple of stats that I think are significant, Buck, and I don't know if you've seen these, but I want to hit you with them and get your reaction. First of all, 538 website, Nate Silver's website, and Real Clear Politics, both early this week on Wednesday, for the first time in Joe Biden's tenure as president, his approval rating has dropped below 50%. Now, this is significant because it really doesn't factor in much of what's gone on with Afghanistan yet. And we know all of the favorable media attention that Joe Biden has gotten. For him to drop below 50% approval, we talked about how many people who voted for Biden wish they could have a do-over and vote for Trump. Does it surprise you, Buck Sexton, that even with the bias polls that we know exist, they're not even able to keep Joe Biden above water now and say over half of the American public supports him?
Anybody who voted for Joe Biden because they thought, they believed, and the media was insistent, they were mendacious, I mean, they lied constantly about this, that it would return us to normalcy, or anybody who believed that there was something transactional that was good for the country,
yes,
right? It was going to be good.
There were millions of people who believed what you're saying.
Yes, he would do a good job with fill in the blank. And by the way, that's really what you look at people who are independents, undecideds, you get into and it's usually, the economy or immigration or something, and it's whoever they believe will be better on.
That's right.
Anyone who thought normalcy or competence was coming with this administration already realizes this was a massive mistake. They regret the vote and realize that the country is not in a better place in those ways for those reasons. The loony libs who are triple masking while they're riding around outside on their tricycles and talking about how Dr. Fauci is, a sex god and he's amazing. They are never going to turn their backs on Joe Biden because they've been convinced, they've been brainwashed into thinking that, let's have a little fun game here for a second, Clay. The first year of the Trump presidency, what was the big problem? What was we had a booming economy, a booming stock market, peace, no major terrorist attacks, tax cuts, and the media was in a frenzy. They were at DEFCON 2 because of a lie of Russia collusion. If you compare up to this point, the first term of Trump and the first year of Trump in his term and the first year of Biden, it's not even close. It's not even the same universe.
That's right.
It's an A student and a D student.
And Trump, other than COVID, would have dominated Biden in 2020. Okay, so those numbers, Joe Biden now under 50%. So far, I have only seen one poll that has begun to factor in Afghanistan. Reuters has dropped Joe Biden's approval rating by 7 points. This came out on Tuesday from 53% approval all the way down to 46. And some people out there, okay, you may not trust polls, but to kind of put it into context, we know the Trump polls were always a mess, but George W. Bush, 7 months in, 56% approval rating. Barack Obama, 7 months in, 59% approval rating, according to these same polls, all right? Under 50%, this is significant for going into the midterms. The average president under 50% loses 37 House seats in the first midterm. I can't imagine Joe Biden being able, I'm curious, I imagine you would too, to go up, right? It's only going to continue to go down between now and 2022.
I hate over-promising, and one of my mantras in life is never celebrate early, Yeah. You never want to be, to borrow from your world, Mr. Travis, you never want to be the guy who's high-stepping in the end zone.
In the first quarter.
It gets nailed at the 2-yard line, right? You never want to be that guy.
You don't want to drop the ball too early either, which is what a lot of people do now.
But I got to say, we're right now we're on track. Some people can say, "Don't say it." We're on track for something along the lines of the 2010 Tea Party wave, just based on the incompetence. Maybe. Yeah, just based on the incompetence of the Biden administration. And look, I know it's a long way off, and a lot can change between now and then. But when you see what the problems are of the Biden administration, usually year one of a presidency, they can get away with, we don't know yet. We don't know what the real results of our decisions are. We're going to either raise taxes or lower taxes. Right. We're going to have some kind of an agreement. We're going to try something on health care. It's going to take time. And the media can run a lot of interference for the Democrats, as they do convincing people that it's all going to work out. So even if it doesn't look that great, Biden has managed to, in the areas where he has asserted the most control and made the most clear decisions, created catastrophes. I mean, created really negative, obviously negative outcomes in the first 8 months. I mean, this is kind of unprecedented in that way.
It's calamitous. Here's an idea for you, Buck. I think you can make the strong argument. The only good thing for Joe Biden right now is, as bad of a job as he has done, Kamala Harris is less popular than he is. So there's nobody trying to raise up behind him, because that was the big fear, was Kamala's there, she's going to sweep in and take over for Joe Biden. I think Democrats are more terrified of how much Kamala is disliked in this country, so they're going to keep Joe Biden in that spot. It's a little bit like Virginia, when the governor had the blackface scandal and the lieutenant governor had the sexual assault. Then you had another blackface scandal in the attorney general's office. Northam was able to stay governor, not because of his competence, but because everybody was even arguably more incompetent beneath him. I think that might be the only saving grace for Joe Biden right now, because otherwise, I think people would be saying, hey, this guy's Democrats would be saying, hey, we need to elevate Kamala. He's not up to this.
And Kamala, the Democrat apparatus, I do think, knows that in the same way that they didn't want to put Bernie Sanders socialism, which is really largely the ideology of the Democrat Party now, they just won't call it that. They didn't want to put that to a vote. I mean, I still think it should have been Trump versus Sanders in this last election. That would have been a more honest
if
Democrat
the DNC
Party
had been honest. It might have been the case in 2016 too, if they had been honest.
Right. Okay. For where it actually is, but they didn't want to actually pose that to the voters. I think they also know that if you're talking about Kamala as the standard bearer for the Democrat Party, it's one thing for the Democrat, the DNC apparatus to elevate her, and there's all the optics of this, but they don't want to put it to a vote with the American people because she'll lose, right? So they know that that's a bad idea, and you got Joe Biden, who is their guy. It was supposed to be a pretty easygoing, Joe Biden's the guy approach. And that then gives cover to the socialists within the party, the squad and the rest of them, to push for their crazy ideas. Because, don't worry, Joe, good old Grandpa Joe's holding it all together, right? We can trust the Democrats with Grandpa Joe at the helm. Now it looks like Grandpa Joe has taken the sailboat and run it right into the rocks, which means the rest of the socialists, the Democrat Party, don't have that cover from people who are saying, but we know we can trust Joe. No, you can't, actually.
And they're not even going to get that 1 year honeymoon. The honeymoon is over at 7 or 8 months, and I only see it getting worse as we move into an election year next year. And then if you presume, which I think you have to, that Democrats are going to lose the House at a minimum and probably the Senate, what in the world is Biden going to be capable of going forward? Is he going to decide to run? Are they going to try to drag him across the finish line? Kamala, it's racist and sexist if Joe doesn't run and she's not the nominee. They're in a mess of a situation right now on a national party level.
And just real quick, what do they have to offer up as the great thing they're going to do?
Nothing.
They can't get the rest of they're going to pass this massive budget, fine, but they're not going to be able to get through. And in an election year, you think they're going to get through legislation with these razor-thin margins? Oh, gee, maybe they never had a mandate in the first place, and now that reality is starting to set in because the American people see what a clown show we're dealing with here, the Democrats, and that's a problem.
And I'm not even sure they get through the budget now with all of the mess in Afghanistan, COVID continuing to rise as an issue.